Floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Madam President, distinguished colleagues, the coronavirus pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, has shown us how vulnerable humankind is when facing biological threats. It has already taken and continues taking a huge number of human lives. In 1975, when the Convention on Banning the Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention came into force, we had the hope that the world managed to get rid itself of at least those biological threats which are created by men, because everyone who signed this understood the huge risks of using biological weapons and decided to forego any plans to develop it. Unfortunately, we have reason to believe that these hopes have not been fully fulfilled. We convene the meeting today because, as Russia is conducting a special military operation in Ukraine, we discovered a truly shocking fact of emergency cleanup by the Kiev regime of the traces of a military biological program which is being implemented by Kiev with support by the United States Ministry of Defense. Our Ministry of Defense, Russian Ministry of Defense, now has documents which confirms that on the territory of Ukraine there was a network consisting of at least 30 biological laboratories in which very dangerous biological experiments are being conducted, aimed at strengthening the pathogenic qualities of the plague, anthrax, tularemia, cholera, and other lethal diseases using synthetic biology. This work is being done and funded and supervised by the Defense Threat Reduction Agency of the United States, including in the interest of the National Center for Medical Intelligence of the United States Ministry of Defense. The key role in implementing this program was placed by the Central Reference Laboratory with the Biosafety Level 3, using for its the basis of the Ukrainian Scientific Anti-Plague Institute named after Mechnikov and located in Odessa. An active participant here was also conducted by research centers in other cities of Ukraine, in Kiev, in Lvov, in Kharkov, in Dnepr, in Kherson, in Ternopil, in Uzhhorod, and Vinnytsia. The results of this work were being sent to military biological centers in the United States, including into the U.S. Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases, into the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research, into the Naval Medical Research of the U.S. Navy, and into the U.S. Army Biological Warfare Laboratories in Fort Detrick, which used to be being key facilities of the American program to develop biological weapons. All of these materials are available on the website of our Ministry of Defense, and our Ministry of Defense is describing them in the course of their daily briefings. Let me just dwell on the more salient examples. Our military became aware of the details of the Project UP4, which was being conducted in laboratories of Kiev, Kharkov, and Odessa. The goal is to study the possibility of spreading particularly dangerous infections using migratory birds. And this includes a highly pathogenic influenza H5N1, whose lethality for people reaches 50%, as well as in the Newcastle disease. Yeah, there was another project where the vector of the potential agents of biological weapon, bats, were considered. Amongst priority areas for study, they include the bacterial and viral pathogens that could spread from bats to people, such as plague, leptospirosis, and as well as filoviruses and coronaviruses. As can see from the project documents, the United States actively funded the biological projects in Ukraine. Experiments were being conducted to study the spread of dangerous diseases using ectoparasites such as lice and fleas. Even non-specialists understand that such experiments are one of the more reckless because they do not give you an opportunity to control how the situation is going to develop further. Similar studies using lice and fleas as agents were conducted in the 1940s by the infamous Squad 731 of the Japanese Army, whose members, by the way, found refuge in the United States and escaped justice. Ukraine has a unique geographical location. A whole number of migratory routes cross there for potential spreaders of disease, and many of them go through Russia and Eastern Europe. The research I just mentioned was conducted in the very heart of Eastern Europe and in immediate proximity of the Russian border. As the data we received shows us, the birds which were ringed and released as a result of bio research in Kherson Zoo, they were caught in Ivanovo and Voronezh Oblast of the Russian Federation later. And the analysis of the materials shows that there was a transfer from biolaboratory in Kharkov abroad of about 140 containers with ectoparasites of bats. And we do not know what was the further fate of these dangerous materials and what a consequence is going to be of the fact that there was no international control there, and they will simply dissolve, quite probably, over Europe. In any event, there is a very high risk that they will be stolen and used for terrorist purposes, or that they will be sold on the black market. Using the pretext of curing for coronavirus, from Ukraine into the Walter Reed Institute in the United States, several thousand samples of blood serum of the people was taken, and most of them are of Slavic extraction. Everyone knows how careful people in the West are when it comes to transferring biomaterials of Western nationals abroad. And there is a reason for that, because in theory, bioagents can be created which can selectively target specific ethnic groups. At the same time, the activity of biological laboratories, who we notice have been active since 2014, and what is being implemented by the United States within the program of so-called reform of Ukrainian healthcare, led to a uncontrolled growth in Ukraine when it comes to particularly dangerous and economically important infections. There is a growing number of German measles cases, diphtheria and tuberculosis. Cases of measles went up by a factor of more than 100. World Health Organization declared Ukraine a country with a high risk of an outbreak of poliomyelitis. There is also evidence to show that in Kharkov, where one of such laboratories is located, in January 2016, 20 Ukrainian soldiers died from the swine flu and 200 more were hospitalized. By March of the same year, in Ukraine, 364 people already died from swine flu. The outbreak of African swine fever in Ukraine have become a regular occurrence. In 2019, there was an outbreak of a disease which symptomatically is very close to plague. At the time when the military biological studies in the United States were removed because of danger to the people, the Kiev authorities basically agreed to make their country into an experimental platform and using their citizens as guinea pigs. These experiments with a potential risk for the entire country is something that went on for years. And we can see in this yet another confirmation of an extraordinary cynicism of Kiev's mentors, who tell us all the time that they're very concerned by the fate of the Ukrainian people. If we are to believe what is being said by Reuters, and the WHO recommended that Ukraine should eliminate the particularly dangerous pathogens they have to make sure that they avoid leaks. Otherwise, this could lead to the spread of diseases amongst the population. And we don't know whether Kiev implemented that recommendation. The Ministry of Defense of ours has materials stating that all of the serious studies of high level of danger in biological laboratories in Ukraine were conducted under the leadership of specialists of the United States who had diplomatic immunity. Currently, according to our Ministry of Defense, the Kiev regime, according to the request of their Western mentors, are trying to clean it all up to make sure that the Russian side does not find direct evidence that the United States and Ukraine are violating Article 1 of Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention. Their biological programs are being urgently closed up, and the Ministry of Health of Ukraine set as the goal to, as of the 24th of February, fully destroy the bioagents in laboratories. The analysis of instructions in laboratories tells us that the order of liquidations is aimed at their irretrievable elimination. Our analysis shows that in Lviv alone, 233 containers with leptospirosis agents were destroyed, 30 with tularemia, 10 with brucellosis, 5 with plague. Overall, 320 containers. The nomenclature and the excessive number of biopathogens leads us to believe that these work were conducted within the framework of a military biological program. I would like to address my colleagues from Europe separately. Right next to the European Union, you've had an experimental platform for extremely dangerous biological trials. And we call upon you to think about a very real biological danger to the people in European countries, which can result from an uncontrolled spread of bioagents from Ukraine, which, as we have seen with COVID-19, is impossible to stop. And if there is such a scenario, then all Europe will be covered by it. Representatives of the United States provide confusing information about the involvement of the United States in this activity. Victoria Nuland, Assistant Secretary of State, basically confirmed the fact that there were dangerous studies being conducted in Ukrainian laboratories in Congress in 8th of March. There was a direct question put by Senator Marco Rubio, and she replied and said that in Ukraine there are research structures which should not end up in the hands of the Russian armed forces. End of quote. At the same time, the State Department continue insisting that on the territory of Ukraine, there are no laboratories under the control of the United States. We would like to, in this regard, put a question to the American delegation. How can this tally with the agreement of 2005 between your Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Health of Ukraine about cooperation in the area of development technologies and pathogens, which could be used so as to develop bioweapons? This document exists in the Internet, and in line with Article 3 of this agreement, the Ministry of Defense of the United States can extend assistance to the Ministry of Health of Ukraine in the area of joint biological research, determining threats from biological agents and working out a response to them as relates to, and I quote, to the dangerous pathogens deployed on objects on the territory of Ukraine. And I would like to underscore here that biological threats, because of its very nature, knows no borders. There is no region in the world today who can feel safe. The United States are overseeing several hundreds laboratories in about 30 countries in the Middle East and Africa, Southeast Asia, and also on the perimeter of the former USSR. Placing it under international verification is something that Washington categorically refusing to do. They've blocked, since 2001, a legally binding protocol under the Biological and Toxic Weapons Convention about creating an effective verification mechanism to ensure compliance. And this can but lead us to the thought that the United States have something to hide. I call upon colleagues in these regions to think about what kind of an activity Washington is conducting on their territory, what the consequences for your people will be. I can foresee what the reaction will be from our Western colleagues, who I'm sure are going to be saying now that all of this information is fake and Russian propaganda. But this is self-delusion, and I do not think this will be helpful to the European people in case there are outbreaks in Ukraine or neighboring states with further spread and bringing in their wake dangerous diseases. The risk of this is very real, given the interest that the radical nationalist groups in Ukraine are showing towards the work with dangerous pathogens conducted together with the Ministry of Defense of the United States. We also know that in the case of any such incident, Pentagon told their Ukrainian colleagues to immediately accuse the armed forces of the Russian Federation of this, say that they are striking against scientific and medical institutions, and or link these incidents with the Russian diversionary groups. The Ministry of Defense of Russia continues analyzing the biological situation in Ukraine and the materials we keep receiving. What we told you today is a very small portion of the information that we have. Detailed information is something that we will disseminate in the very near future. As an official document of Security Council, you will be able to study it. We think it is our duty to keep the Security Council informed of the situation when it comes to the military biological activity by the United States in Ukraine. It creates real risk for international peace and security, and we intend to revert to the discussion of this topic in the very near future. We do not exclude the possibility of invoking the mechanism of Articles 5 and 6 of the Biological and Toxic Weapons Convention. At present, however, we expect to hear responses from the American side to the questions that we put. I thank you, Madam President.
أشكر ممثل الاتحاد الروسي على بيانه.
I would like to thank the representative of the Russian Federation.
Russia asked the Security Council for today's meeting for the sole purpose of lying and spreading disinformation, and that is exactly what you have heard from the Russian PR this morning. You also heard from Ms. Nakamitsu that the UN is not aware of any biological or chemical weapons programs in Ukraine. Last month, Secretary Blinken laid out with tragic accuracy what Russia was about to do. He specifically warned that Russia would manufacture a pretext for attack, and even cautioned that Russia would fabricate allegations about chemical or biological weapons to justify its own violent attacks against the Ukrainian people. Today, the world is watching Russia do exactly what we warned it would. Russia is attempting to use the Security Council to legitimize disinformation and deceive people to justify President Putin's war of choice against the Ukrainian people. And China, too, has been spreading disinformation in support of Russia's outrageous claims. I will say this once. Ukraine does not have a biological weapons program. There are no Ukrainian biological weapons laboratories supported by the United States, not near Russia's border or anywhere. So here are the facts. Ukraine owns and operates its own public health laboratory infrastructure. These facilities make it possible to detect and diagnose diseases like COVID-19, which benefit us all. The United States has assisted Ukraine to do this safely and securely. This is work that has been done proudly, clearly, and out in the open. This work has everything to do with protecting the health of people. It has absolutely nothing to do with biological weapons. In fact, it is Russia that has long maintained a biological weapon program in violation of international law. It is Russia that has a well-documented history of using chemical weapons. It is Russia who is the aggressor here. It was Russian operatives who poisoned Alexei Navalny and Sergei and Yulia Skripal with nerve agents. It is Russia that continues to support the Assad regime in Syria and shield it from accountability when the UN and the OPCW have confirmed that Assad has repeatedly used chemical weapons over the past several years. And we're deeply concerned that Russia's calling for this meeting is a potential false flag effort in action. Exactly the kind we have been warning about, including from Secretary Blinken here in the Security Council last month. Russia has a track record of falsely accusing other countries of the very violations that Russia itself is perpetrating. And given that, and consistent with our previous statements, we have serious concerns that Russia may be planning to use chemical or biological agents against the Ukrainian people. The intent behind these lies seem clear, and it is deeply troubling. We believe Russia could use chemical or biological agents for assassinations as part of a staged or false flag incident or to support tactical military operations. From the beginning, our strategy to counter Russia's tactics has been to share what we know with the world transparently. And candidly, we have been right more than we'd like to. We're not going to let Russia get away with lying to the world or staining the integrity of the Security Council by using this forum as a venue for legitimizing Putin's violence. Russia has attacked homes, schools, orphanages, and hospitals. Russia has attacked civilian infrastructure, including water and sanitation facilities. Their forces are laying Ukrainian cities under siege. Hundreds of thousands of civilians now don't have access to electricity for heat or drinking water to stay alive. Russia is the aggressor here. And despite Russia's best efforts, the media and everyday Ukrainians are documenting this truth on the ground. Russia can't paint over the front page of the New York Times, which on Monday featured the bodies of a Ukrainian mother and her 2 children, who died while trying to cross a bridge outside Kyiv in their attempt to flee to safety. Russia cannot cover up the work of AP News reporters who captured a doctor attempting to resuscitate an 18-month-old Kirill who died from Russian shelling in Mariupol. Russia cannot suppress the social media posts confirmed and amplified by CBS News that told the story of the 11-year-old Ukrainian boy who fled to Slovakia by himself with only a passport, a plastic bag, and a phone number scrawled on his hands. Russia cannot silence the Al Jazeera report of Russian soldiers terrorizing Ukrainian cities. And Ukrainian journalists are risking their lives every day to deliver to the world the latest on-the-ground facts, such as Novo Vremya reporting on the reckless behavior of Russian forces toward Ukraine's nuclear facilities. Russia is failing in its quest to create an alternative reality. In fact, not even Russian diplomats can keep their propaganda straight. Just yesterday, the Kremlin spokesman said he didn't have clear information about the Russian forces who fired on a maternity hospital. Then the foreign minister himself denied Russia attacked Ukraine at all, right before admitting that Russia deliberately targeted this maternity hospital in Mariupol. Their fabrications didn't matter because the world had already seen the searing images broadcast on CNN of bloodied pregnant women being evacuated from the scene of Russia's attack on the hospital. Even Russia's own citizens are tiring of such lies. Russian athletes are writing "No war" on their shoes and on TV cameras. Russian citizens are marching in the streets and protesting Putin's war of choice. and even Russian state TV pundits, Putin's own propaganda arm, have called for Putin to stop the military action. This is why we didn't object to holding today's meeting. Today's meeting has confirmed our predictions, revealed Russia's objectives to the world, and exposed Russia's lies for what they are, a malicious effort to cover for the atrocities being committed by Russia as part of their illegal and unprovoked attack on Ukraine. It is a page directly out of the Russian playbook, and it will not convince us one bit. The world is watching. Photographic and video evidence is mounting, and you will be held to account for your actions. We will not let atrocities slide. Unlike the Russian government, whose first instinct is to silence, we are confident that truth and transparency will prevail. We call on President Putin to end this unprovoked, unconscionable war against the Ukrainian people. Thank you.
The floor is to the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, what conclusion could be drawn from the discussion we've had today? As we expected, our Western colleagues, first and foremost, neither one of them addressed the substance of the issue we put forward. When my American colleague was throwing thunderbolts and accused us, as we expected, of propaganda, two things came to mind. First of all, a Russian saying, according to which a guilty mind is never at ease. The louder people are trying to shift the blame on us, the greater is our conviction that we hit the nail on the head when we're talking about their nefarious activity in Ukraine. Secondly, I remember another story which was mentioned many times and in many contexts about the container shown by Colin Powell some time ago here in this room, which became the foundation for the United States going into Iraq, and which led to a huge level of suffering and victims and destruction, which then reverberated in the whole region, reverberated also in the form of a terrorist organization called ISIL. That is the real palm d'or that the Albanian colleague mentioned today. And he stated, many of you said that you are unaware of the military biological programs in Ukraine. That doesn't mean that they didn't exist in actual fact. Military development is a secret enterprise, and those who are involved in that do not report to Ms. Nakamitsu about it. I also recall Iraq and Mosul, which were razed to the ground and buried under their rubble thousands of civilians. And this was done by the forces of the coalition headed by the United States. And the bodies remained there for several months. And I do not recall righteous ire on the part of the colleagues about this. We raised this issue many times, but this died and was buried, and people prefer not to recall that. But on the other hand, we hear every day about the atrocities of the Russian army attacks on hospitals, kindergartens, schools, maternity hospitals using cluster bombs, something that was refuted repeatedly by our Ministry of Defense. The maternity hospital number one in Mariupol has become the common parlance in this regard. Let me ask you this. Did you listen to what we said here in this room on Monday, 7th of March, when we said that the fighters, the radicals, converted that building into an attack base? This is something that we warned about even then. Apparently you don't listen, or you don't hear what it is that we say. Did you see the photos of the allegedly destroyed maternity hospital, the building of the hospital destroyed by a bomb? What you can see there is a building without windows, but it's not destroyed. Here are the photos. Can you imagine what would have happened to a building if it underwent a bomb strike or shelling, as well as to those who were inside the building? What would have happened to it? So we have the videos from inside the building. Here they are. And they show that there is disorder, overturned furniture, and untouched intact chairs. Once again, can you imagine what kind of destruction would have remained in the wake of a building hit by a rocket or a bomb? Ask military specialists, they will tell you. They have already said that. They show the photos of a crater near the building, which resulted from an exploded mine. At the same time, we are being told about the 17 wounded in the building, and not a single death, by the way. And by way of evidence, what is showed is a false picture of a Ukrainian blogger, Mariana Podgorskaya here, she was shot by an AP stringer, Evgeny Maloletka. This blogger lady is using two different kinds of makeup to present herself as two different women in photographs. And this is something that was revealed by the network users themselves. We are dismayed by the dirty campaign to blame us for intentionally shelling a civilian infrastructure. You are accusing us of propaganda and fake, whilst ignoring a huge number of fakes which are being churned out in Ukraine and in the West, so as to conduct a special psychological operation. At the same time, you coyly going over in silence over the fact that you have basically shut off your access to Russian sources of information. We found a great deal of new things these days about the freedom of speech that you seem to champion. I would like to react now to my UK colleague. She quoted Minister Lavrov incompletely as usual when he said that we did not start the war. This is the exact word. We did not start this war. We want to end it. And it is true that the war was not begun by us. It started 8 years ago by the Kiev authorities in the Donbas. Yesterday in the internet, we show a video where Ukrainians wear military form near Kharkov, let's say, are shooting down what is supposed to be a Russian plane using a movable rocket launcher. There is a car right next to it, the car in which apparently they used to arrive there. Here's a picture. White collar Toyota bearing a logo of the United Nations. We've already asked this question to the representative of this secretariat, and the answer was that UN vehicles are not being used by the Ukrainian territorial defense. We insist on this incident being investigated by the UN. Even it turns out that this is not a UN car. Nonetheless, using a UN logo on a car which is used for military activities is unacceptable. I thank you.
أشكر ممثل الاتحاد الروسي.
Statement, you have the floor.
I know that you expect me to respond, but we're not going to give any more airtime to the lies that you're hearing today. It's beneath this council. And there's only one aggressor here, and that is Russia. And we hope they will be able to find it in their conscience to end the attacks and stop the suffering of the Ukrainian people. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished members of the Security Council, Madam Under-Secretary General Di Carlo, Madam Under-Secretary General Nakamitsu. I should also acknowledge the presence of a separate category here, a representative of the aggressor state, who sits in the seat of the Soviet Union in the Security Council, the status of which was recognized by the General Assembly Resolution ES 11/1, and that is the status of aggressor state. There is already a long record of Russian lies established here in the Council, and only the recollection of the items of lies over the last 2 weeks will take perhaps an hour or so. But let me mention just a couple lowest of the lowest, and I would not hesitate to mention them again after the representative sitting in the Soviet seat just referred to them. Let me quote his kingpin, Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, who said yesterday, indeed, I quote, "We do not plan to attack other countries. We did not attack Ukraine either." End of quote. An outlet of the Russian lies, the Russian embassy in London, tweeted yesterday that a pregnant woman is in the attack maternity hospital in Mariupol, was wearing makeup and was playing multiple roles of pregnant women. And indeed, Moscow and the Russian ambassador here are struggling to get this story straight. Kremlin spokesman Peskov told Reuters in the immediate aftermath of the strike on Wednesday that, I quote, "Russian forces do not fire on civilian targets," end of quote. On Thursday, he told reporters that the Kremlin would look into the incident, I quote, "because you and I don't have clear information about what happened there," end of quote. Following a meeting with the Ukrainian foreign minister in Turkey on Thursday, Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov took a different stance as he claimed without evidence that the hospital in Mariupol was a warranted target because the building had been seized long ago by Ukrainian armed groups. Let me share with you a very good news. Miss Mariana, the pregnant woman, gave birth to a healthy daughter last night. Her name is Veronica. Here she is with her father. No matter what the Russian lies are about herself, her family, and the incident. Mr. President, whatever the gentleman in the Soviet seat may say in reply is most probably useless. We need to hear directly from the mastermind of the war crimes committed so far. As we established that he was out of loop on many occasions, having no clue what was going on the ground. We know quite well that the manic obsession with which Putin fantasizes about non-existent biological or chemical weapons or hazards in Ukraine is very dangerous. It may actually point at Russia preparing another horrific false flag operation. So what else are you going to use against Ukraine? Cruise missiles, multiple rocket launchers, heavy aerial bombs? We have already experienced all of this. What is next? Ammonia, phosphorus? And what will be the next target? One more residential building? One more maternity hospital? One more school? Or maybe one more cultural heritage site? Russian troops have already hit all these sites, all of them. By calling this meeting, the aggressor state has shot itself in foot once again. Ukraine runs a health system that is totally in full compliance with its international obligations and in full cooperation with all relevant international organizations. The rest is a bunch of insane delirium of Putin and his henchmen, including the Russian mission to the United Nations. Russia does not give a monkeys about safety of its own citizens, including thousands of decomposing bodies of Russian soldiers sent by Putin to Ukraine to this ongoing carnage. I regret that the Security Council is being now manipulated by the Russian Federation to promote such an insane delirium. It is an utmost disregard by the Russian Federation of the members of the Security Council. Finally, it is detrimental for the Council's credibility. What indeed has to be addressed by the Council are the war crimes and crimes against humanity that the Russian Federation commits on a daily basis since 24th of February, the day when the war in Europe, unleashed by Russia, started. Among the most recent examples that shocked the world, Russian airstrike that destroyed the maternity hospital that we already mentioned so many times today. Russian indiscriminate shellings and airstrikes have almost destroyed Mariupol, one of the most beautiful cities on the Azov Sea, and killed 1,582 civilian residents of that city, according to the local administration. For the first time since the World War II, people are being buried in mass graves in Ukrainian cities. I would like to use this opportunity to ask the gentleman in the Soviet seat, if you are really connected, wired to Moscow, please talk to Moscow to release the kidnapped mayor of the city of Melitopol. Please help us get him back from the arms of the invaders. Kharkiv, Chernihiv, Sumy, Izium, Akhtirka, Volnovakha, and many other Ukrainian cities are being razed to the ground. Documents and maps seized by the Ukrainian troops from Russian prisoners of war confirm that bombardments of residential areas had been planned in advance. Captured Russian pilots at today's press conference in Kiev have reconfirmed that they deliberately dropped the bombs on residential areas. The number of civilians killed by the Russian troops exceeds military losses. Many people have lost their homes, more than 1.5 million left Ukraine, almost 2 million by now, across the western border. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions, became IDPs. Only from Kharkiv, 600,000 people were evacuated by trains. The main efforts are now focused on ensuring safe passage of civilians through humanitarian corridors. Unfortunately, the arrangements are often violated by the Russian troops. awful pictures and footages taken near the destroyed breach in Irpin with killed civilians, including entire families who tried to flee the occupied areas, have circled and horrified the globe. Russia must not use civilians as hostages in human shield. By exposing cities to indiscriminate shelling and creating a dire humanitarian situation, deliberately shelling civilians during the evacuation from the besieged Ukrainian cities, Russia is forcing civilians to flee their homes and providing only a corridor to its territory or to Belarus. So-called green corridors proposed by the aggressor for sending people to Russia and Belarus could be considered as forcible deportation of protected persons according to international humanitarian law. Mr. President, Ukrainian people are being killed and Ukrainian cities are being destroyed as we are compelled to listen to the Russian absurd fakes in the Security Council. Fakes created in a desperate attempt to whitewash the war against Ukraine. Russian aggression threatens us all, and there is an urgent need to be resolute in countering uncivilized, barbaric, and mean actions by Russia. The sooner the aggressor is stopped and held accountable for his crimes, the safer our world will be. I will not end before I read several paragraphs from an open letter from 194 Nobel laureates. I quote, "The undersigned Nobel laureates voice our support for the Ukrainian people and the free and independent state of Ukraine as it faces Russian aggression." 194 Nobel laureates. In a move that recalls the infamous attack of Nazi Germany on Poland in 1939, using similar tricks of feigned provocation, the government of the Russian Federation, led by President Putin, has launched an unprovoked military aggression, nothing else but a war against its neighbor, Ukraine. We choose our words carefully here, for we do not believe the Russian people have a role in this aggression. We join in condemning these military actions and President Putin's essential denial of the legitimacy of Ukraine's existence. We respect the calm and the strength of the Ukrainian people. We are with you. Our hearts go out to the families and friends of all Ukrainians and Russians who have died and been injured already. May peace come to this piece of our beautiful world. End of quote. I thank you.